X-Men 97 drops this week, today even, and as with absolutely everything in popular culture today, easily triggered sad sacks are very upset about wokeness, a vaguely definable thing which is ruining apparently everything more than their incessant whining is ruining things. This time the culprit is X-Men, of course, because apparently it has gone woke. And as a person who has been reading X-Men since the 1980s, I'm here to give you a little easily attainable context if you'd bothered to read any of the issues prior to today. The X-Men have always been woke, however you want to define that. And trying to make the X-Men about anything other than about social justice and civil rights is actually what ruins and destroys a good X-Men story, and not the other way around. Stick around for your remaining hate watch or weekly factual, historical, and social context to pop culture from me, Dan Umpton. Stick around. This is the Doomcast. Alright, do me a favor, hit subscribe and the bell. I make about one of these videos a week. They are all great, so please don't miss even one. Now, listen, if you're already mad, please just go ahead and leave a lengthy paragraph-long comment on this video about exactly why I'm incorrect without watching the rest of this video, because if we're being honest, nothing can convince you that wokeness isn't the enemy that you actually think it is. You are lost in the right-wing YouTube sauce. That's fine. You've just been ignoring the clear subtext for 60 years until it forced you to look in the mirror and realize that you look just like Robert Kelly or William Stryker or Graydon Creed, and you're a bigot. And we're all embarrassed for you. We feel bad for you in a way, or maybe we don't. So if you like, comment and tell me how I'm alienating my audience by calling them bigots, which I'm not. But if you are actually my audience and a fan of the X-Men, please stick around. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby arguably may have ripped off Arnold Drake's concept of a team of misfit heroes, teenagers led by a wheelchair-bound professor from DC's Doom Patrol. It's also possible that it may have happened vice versa, as the two debuted within months of each other in 1963, but it wouldn't have been the first time that Lee and Kirby had parroted a DC property. Fantastic Four was not far off from Challengers of the Unknown, which Jack Kirby had worked on as well. Anyway, it doesn't matter because this kind of stuff happened between Marvel and DC all the time, and within 5 years, Arnold Drake would also be writing the X-Men. So, what does matter is that in 1963, the world was in a state of massive social and political upheaval, as it still is today. And Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, both Jewish men from New York City who had served in the US military during World War II, had uniquely experienced the brunt of the collective trauma that the world had experienced in the Holocaust not 20 years before. The two men's books were, from the House of Ideas, very steadfastly gripped with the social issues of the day as much as they could be with the existing comics code, as well as showing the human side of characters with superpowers. Spider-Man, the Hulk, the Avengers, Fantastic Four, they were not just paragons and gods like other comic books that portrayed superheroes at the time, but they were people with problems, in as much as that could be written into comics during that time. And the X-Men, of course, were no different. The only difference was from the outset that the X-Men were from an underclass of people. Very specifically, they were mutants, misunderstood or regarded as dangerous because of the supposed terrorist actions that represented all mutants. The X-Men's first mission was to stop Magneto's takeover of Cape Citadel's spaceport, a stand-in for Cape Canaveral. Now, almost all the early Lee and Kirby stories focused on the weirder aspect of mutants, and introduced a lot of important characters that would later become pretty pivotal in the series overall. Especially the concept of mutants being referred to as freaks, even by human side characters that they considered allies. But it was the revival by Dave Cockrum and Len Wein and Giant Size X-Men #1, with a new international and very diverse lineup of X-Men that truly grounded the X-Men as being a metaphor for concepts of social justice. Their personal identities, as much as their classification as mutants, became central to their character. Granted, that often took the form of their national identity, as well as Claremont's work, but Aurora's experience as a black woman, Kitty's as a Jewish kid, Kurt's as the person of faith that looks like a demon were major plot elements very frequently, and it's worth noting that there were definitely unwoke moments in there, definitely unwoke elements if you want to call them that. Kitty more than once used the N-word, even if it was in the context of explaining racial disparities. Not that she wasn't white-splaining that to a black dude, but still, it was crazy out of pocket for her to say, even for the 1980s, especially being written by a white dude talking as an ostensibly 13-year-old girl. Unquestionably, the moment that solidified X-Men as being an obliquely political metaphor for social justice that was entirely unavoidable was Claremont and Anderson's 1982 graphic novella, God Loves, Man Kills, in which Magneto seeks revenge on bigoted Reverend William Stryker and Senator Robert Kelly for targeting and stochastic terrorism of mutants, highlighted by Magneto's discovery of murdered mutant children in a playground. The X-Men cartoon debuted in 1992. The central plot for the first season was a loose adaptation of a combination of that story, God Loves, Man Kills, as well as some elements of the introduction of Kitty Pryde to the X-Men and other plot lines which clearly highlighted increasing prejudices against mutants and dehumanization and political violence used against them individually and en masse to incarcerate or murder mutant kind. I gotta say, at the time, these things were completely unthinkable in the United States. I was a kid and only vaguely aware of politics. I barely knew who Hitler was, other than from school, and it seemed like something that he would have done. George H.W. Bush was president, a guy who was the architect of programs that, as CIA director, that stifled democracy, toppled democratic governments around the world, especially Latin America, despite being pretty reasonable on Hispanic immigrants to the United States. But now dehumanizing those same migrants, calling them animals, is commonplace. It literally happened last Friday at a Friends of Humanity, MAGA rally in Ohio. Lone wolf terror against minorities, LGBTQ, black people, that wasn't non-existent in the 1990s, but it's become commonplace today, something that doesn't stay in the news cycle for more than a week. See, that's the reason that you have this sudden frustration with making comics political, or games, or movies, or things being woke. Superheroes in general have always been woke as closely as you can define that word at all. The concept of a struggle for social justice is effectively baked in. Ironically, it's also, since it's been created by liberals, it's also been co-opted very frequently as well. You get billionaires like Tony Stark or Bruce Wayne fighting for working class people, a thing billionaires do not do and have never done. We suspend our disbelief willingly for something like that in that subtext, but suddenly when a character who is gay or black or a gay black man is in charge of a cartoon series based on gay or black characters, suddenly we're ruining people's childhoods and making things too political. This is the entire reason that the Comics Code Authority existed in the first place, because comics have been woke for this long. The publication of Frederick Wertham's Seduction of the Innocent was actually so terrifying to a lot of people that it resulted in the creation of the Comics Code Authority, which was explicitly put there to prevent the depiction, very frequently, of racial disparity, of any kind of alternative sexuality, sexuality in general, specifically also trying to ban leftist and communist propaganda because they were afraid that comic books were radicalizing children. That's how woke comics were when they were created. Superman was throwing landlords out of windows in the 30s. Captain America has been knocking Nazis out since the 1940s. Batman was queer-coded in the 1950s. The X-Men have never not been about civil rights. They just ignored all of this stuff in the 1970s and 80s and 90s as much as they could, but suddenly now it's a problem to them. Because they know it objectively, and it's very easy, but the media has not changed at all. They have. And they simply can't ignore the subtext any longer. That's why they have to call inclusion something other than what it is. They have to call it wokeness or idpol, because they're not being honest with themselves. You know it and I know it. And they're cherry-picking problems because they're upset with who's in it. Both the kind of people that they don't like and themselves. And when you see yourself, you just don't like what you see. Because you see Graydon Creed, William Stryker, and Robert Kelly. You see Friends of Humanity. And maybe that makes you really upset. But what needs to change? The media? Or you?